This is one of my favorite topics that I've covered in the past, new house stories, in which unsuspecting people who just moved into their new homes discover something, or perhaps someone that shouldn't be there. About 10 years ago, I moved into a new house with my wife and our daughter, who at the time was very young. It was a nice neighborhood with many other houses. But one thing I was really excited about was the yard. We had lived in a small townhouse before that, and barely had a yard at all, and the new neighborhood had a lot more space. Our yard was almost an acre, and I would say most people over there had about that as well. So after moving in and getting all the furniture in the house and stuff, there was a lot of work that I wanted to do in the yard. For example, there wasn't much landscaping, the grass had some dead spots, and there was a good number of weeds in the backyard. So one day, soon after moving in, I went outside to do a bunch of the yard work. My wife stayed inside the house with our daughter. I remember that I worked for a few hours, and then I had to go to Home Depot to get some stuff I left, and came back. Pretty quickly. I don't recall much of that trip because it was pretty normal. However, after I got back, I went into the backyard, sort of on the side of it from where I was working. I could see part of the street in front of our house. The street was normally very quiet because it's just residential. A short time after getting back, I saw this older car pull up and park. On the side of the road, it was parked between our house and the next door neighbors. I didn't think too much of it until I saw a man get out and then just sort of stand inside of our yard on our property. Then the man was looking at me as he slowly walked in my direction. He was moving extremely slow, and I didn't know who he was. I had met both next-door neighbors, as well as the ones across the street, and this guy wasn't any of them. He was kind of standing around and also kind of walking closer, and I stopped what I was doing, and I began to walk over to the man to see what he wanted. However, as I approached, the man turned and then went to my left and very quickly went out of my sight, because the house now blocked him. I walked faster and then arrived in the front yard. But I didn't see the man. I thought that maybe he was going to knock on our front door. But when I looked, he wasn't there. I quickly went inside and called to my wife, asking if anybody had entered the house just to be safe. Thankfully, she said nobody had. So I went back out and I looked all around the front yard, and then went into the backyard as well. I didn't see the man. I wasn't quite sure where he went. There were a good number of trees and bushes around people's properties, but I didn't think that the guy was hiding or anything. I figured that he must have just cut through our yard to maybe get to somebody else's. The whole thing seemed really strange, because the man's behavior was kind of odd. But overall, I didn't know what else to do. So I just went back to work. I got quite a bit of yard work done, and things were looking much better. I remember noticing that after several hours, the man's car was still there. I continued with the work, though, and when I was almost done, I remember that out of nowhere, I heard something behind me. When I looked back, I saw the guy again. He was in my backyard, and like 50 feet away from me. After seeing him, the man looked at me and I called out, asking what he was doing in my yard. The man didn't answer me. I started to walk over to him, and he quickly turned and started walking in the other direction. The man then went behind some trees on the edge of the property. I walked over there and looked around. I called out for him several more times, but he never answered me, and I didn't know where he went. Pretty soon, I gave up looking for him. He seemed to be off my property, really. I had no idea who this guy was or what he was doing, but it was seeming really suspicious. So I went back to work, and I remember that maybe 20 or 30 minutes later, I heard a car door closing. I moved over to get a view of the street, and I saw the car driving away. This made me feel a ton better, knowing that the man was now gone. So I finished up with the work for the day, and I had the backyard looking a lot better. Then I went inside the next morning. When I got up and looked outside, I saw that the backyard was all messed up. Somebody had literally messed up most of the work that I did. I was so mad. But I also had a feeling that it was that same guy. Of course, I had no proof I had to do most of the work over again. And I also went out and bought security cameras and put them up. However, after that, the man never returned. This has remained a strange mystery. My wife Taylor and I recently moved out of our old home. She didn't like being so close to her family and wanted to put some distance between us and them. So that's what we did. We don't have kids. And she stopped working ages ago, so she was relatively amenable to my suggestions about where to move. I'm an electrician, so bouncing around isn't much of a problem for me. We eventually settled on New Mexico. We've both been rural people all our lives. So it wasn't that drastic of a lifestyle change. That was about 3 months ago, give or take. We found a fantastic deal on a place. Way out in the country, the house is honestly bigger than we really need, especially since it's just the two of us and our black lab, Lola. But honestly, we figured we'd make use out of the extra space, maybe even host some of the friends we'd make. We'd been settled in for a few months when I started noticing something odd. The upstairs lights kept tripping circuits, but the rest of the house would still have power after this happened. Once or twice, I knew exactly what the problem was. Like I said, I'm literally an electrician. So this kind of stuff is my bread and butter. I figured it would be an easy fix, just a matter of rearranging some of the load on the breaker, which in all likelihood was downstairs. Times like those make me happy that I'm the type of guy who knows how to fix things. To be honest, I hadn't spent that much time in the basement since we moved in. I didn't really have a reason to. We looked it over briefly when the realtor showed us the place, but I didn't pay much attention. Come to think of it, I don't think I'd been in there one time since then. Anyway, I walked down the stairs and started looking around for the main breaker. The basement was pretty cluttered, and definitely not the type of space that could be easily used. It looked more like a storage room than a basement. Eventually, I figured out where the main was and started fussing around. After about 10 minutes, I realized where the load imbalance was and told myself I'd rewire it. When I had more time at that point, I was about to go upstairs when curiosity got the better of me. I figured since I was down in the basement already, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have a look around. After all, this is my house. And it was honestly a little strange that I didn't know every square inch of it. Like I said, most of it was filled with old furniture and a bunch of junk. There wasn't anything particularly interesting down there, and I eventually concluded that trying to transform it into a usable space would be way too much of a hassle. That's when I noticed something odd. In the far corner of the basement, behind a stack of old wooden chairs, was a large metal door. It was strange because this wasn't just any door. It looked industrial grade. It was also a lot taller than most normal doors would be, and seemed pretty thick, too. I walked over to it and my suspicions were confirmed. It looked like the type of door you'd see securing a walk-in safe or some kind of panic room. My first thought was, maybe it was a tornado shelter or storm room or something. But that would be a weird surprise. You'd think the realtor would have mentioned a feature like that. I tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. It was locked. I immediately went upstairs and started rummaging through the drawer of keys the previous owner had left behind, in case we locked ourselves out or something. But none of them worked on the door. I must have tried like 15 keys or something. But no luck. I eventually told Taylor about it. and she was just as curious about it as I was. I'm still not sure how, but she worked her magic and we were able to get in contact with the previous owners. It was that exact phone call that took me from curious about the situation to downright concerned. They were a little odd on the phone and would pause every so often, like they were thinking carefully about what they were saying or trying not to say too much. Part of me wishes I had recorded the conversation, but hindsight is 20/20. When I asked about the door, they got quiet eventually. The wife said it was just a safe room in case of a tornado. I told her that was great, but we were unable to use it since it was locked. After another pause, she claimed they'd lost the key and told us to just ignore it, thought that was extremely unlikely, since they had literally left us keys to random doors that we'd probably never need to lock. The way she said it gave me a really bad feeling in my gut, too. But there was nothing I could do. We ended up hanging up almost immediately after that, as they were definitely not trying to make small talk. Taylor tried to laugh it off, told me I was overthinking it, but I couldn't let it go. Over the course of the next few weeks, I would occasionally wander down the stairs and just stare at that door, wondering what could be inside. I tried everything I could think of to open it, even some tricks I picked up from work. But it was no use. The lock was solid. I ended up giving up for about a week, but the curiosity ultimately got the better of me. Fast forward to 2 days ago, when things took a wild turn. After my wife's wishes, I decided to hire a locksmith. He came over and I let him do his thing. Down there after about 30 minutes, I went downstairs to check on him. He told me that the lock was unusually complex for a simple panic room. Those were his exact words. I was worried he wouldn't be able to get it open, but to my surprise, he actually managed to crack it. After another half hour, I wish he hadn't. Inside the room was set up like some kind of shrine. There were old black and white photographs on the walls, all covered in strange symbols. That I didn't recognize in the center was a chair. Just facing the wall, it looked like someone had spent a lot of time sitting there just staring at nothing. In one corner, there was a cot with crumpled blankets, and it smelled stale and kind of gross. Then I noticed the trash, empty chip bags, crumpled water bottles. The realization smacked me in the face. Someone had actually been staying down there, and not that long ago I was dumbfounded. I didn't think the situation could get much worse, but of course that's what happened as I was trying to take it all in. I noticed a second door on the far right side of the room. It was small and half hidden by the minimal light, but it was there. I opened it and realized it led to a set of stairs that led to the cellar door out inside the house. I felt like such an idiot. I hadn't even had the foresight to check the cellar door when we moved in, since I just assumed it led to the basement in all the time we lived here. I had never even opened it. My bewilderment at the whole thing soon became terror. Someone had literally been living in my house for who knows how long. Things started clicking in my brain since moving in, my wife. And I had noticed a few weird things that we couldn't explain. Most of the time, it was just things going missing, until an explanation, maybe even threatening legal action. But they wouldn't pick up either. They disconnected their number, or they just didn't want to deal with it. Taylor was freaked out, and I was too. That night, I took some heavy furniture and barricaded the cellar door from the inside. I found a heavy-duty looking chain and padlocked it shut. For good measure. I didn't care what it took. There was no way I was letting someone sneak back in through that door. The police came and took down a full report before leaving, telling us they'd do their best to try and get in contact with previous owners. We even called our realtor, who was horrified, and said she'd assist the police in any way she could that night. As we were getting ready for bed, we heard it. There was a loud bang on the front door. Lola shot up barking like crazy, and we both froze. Neither of us moved, just staring at each other. Listening, after a few minutes, the banging stopped. But then we heard small rocks tapping against our bedroom window. Taylor held on to Lola, and I went to look out the window. Taylor begged me not to, but I was furious at that point in my mind. I was preparing to fight whoever was out there. I grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and yanked the curtains away from the window. But I couldn't see a thing. We thought it was. Taylor wanted me to call the police, but there was a little part of me that wanted to handle this myself. I knew the police would scare them away and call it pettiness, but I wanted to make sure whoever was out there got caught. I told her if one more thing happened, I'd call. But then, and from downstairs, I heard the sound of glass shattering. I sprinted downstairs just in time to see two figures running away from the house. The kitchen window was completely shattered. It was then that I called the police, who showed up not long after they searched the house and the basement. But there was no sign of forced entry into the storm room. They didn't find anyone on the property either. Their best guess was that whoever had been living down there was angry when they realized they were locked out and decided to come back and scare us. I was both furious and horrified. My wife has been a wreck ever since the police escalated the situation, since an actual crime happened and said they're working on tracking down the previous owners. But that it could take a few days, that was 2 full days ago, and we still have not been able to get in contact with them. I think the police scared away those squatters, though, at least for now, as they haven't been back to our house since. I'm actually shocked that something like this could even happen in the first place. If we can't get in contact with the previous owner, soon I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do. I'm fully prepared to defend myself. But I hope it doesn't come to that. This happened way back when I was a kid. I was 10 years old, and my family moved into a new house. It wasn't a brand new house, but a little bit newer and nicer than the previous one that we had lived in. It was in the same city as well, which was nice, so I got to keep the same friends living there. Aside from me were my parents and my older sister. So the neighborhood was pretty typical. Many houses each with around the same size yard, all on one street. Literally one of the first nights, after moving in, though I was up late, everyone else had gone to bed, and I was in the living room playing video games. All the lights were off, and the TV was providing the only light that I could see. I was planning to go to bed soon, but just having too good of a time, gaming my volume was on low, so that I wouldn't wake anybody up or anything. I remember hearing outside, it sounded like several cars were driving down the street. I looked over because the street and outside, everything was dead silent. What I saw was these 2 SUVs driving slowly down our quiet road, and then pulling over. They literally pulled over right in front of our house. And that made me a little nervous, so I paused my game and then crept over to the window. I was sitting on the floor, mostly out of view from the window. But I had a good view of the front yard, as well as our front step. After stopping, both vehicle doors opened. I saw about 5 or 6 total men get out of the back seats, and the drivers seemed to remain in the cars. I was so creeped out because all the guys looked kind of shady, dressed in dark colors and wearing hooded sweatshirts. None of them had masks on or anything. But I feared the worst still. I saw a couple of men start walking towards our neighbor's house, and then 2 men started to walk right into our front yard. My heart started racing, and I ducked down. After a few moments, I heard the men walking, and they got right up to our front door. Then one of the guys tried opening it. Thankfully, it was locked. I was so freaked out, and didn't even want to look in fear that they might see me. I didn't hear anything, though, for probably a full 2 minutes, I would say, when I finally gained the courage to look. Both of the guys were still just standing there. They were on the front step, and I had no idea what was going on. Then I had this idea. I really didn't know what caused me to get this brave, but I just stood up and went over to the door. I did not open it, but I turned on the outside light switch. This made the light go on. That was outside, on the front step, when it did. Moments later, I heard the men turn around and start to walk away. Then I went back over to the window. I watched them return to the SUV and go inside. Moments after that, I saw two other men come jogging from the other direction of the neighbor's yard. Then they got inside the other SUV. Then about 30 seconds after that, more guys got in the back of the other SUV. I was so confused. Moments later, both SUVs' engines started and drove away. I stayed up watching the street for about another hour. They never came back. Though after that, I was finally able to go to sleep the next morning. I told my parents about it. They had no clue what it could have been, but they didn't seem that concerned. Still, I was there, and I will never forget how scared I was in those moments. And looking back, I still don't know what exactly was going on going to someone's house. Like that after midnight couldn't be anything good, and they certainly were not salesmen. A few years ago, I moved into a new apartment with a roommate. This was a much better living situation for me. The last place that I had lived was this house, and I literally just rented a singular room there. I had this tiny bathroom attached, and there was like 8 other people living in the house, which was pretty large. It was also old, and the only reason that I lived there was because it was cheap, and it was the only thing that I could afford at the time. So anyways, moving on to my new apartment, it was a 2-bedroom place that I was getting with a roommate. My roommate was this guy named Jack that I had known in college. We were not really that close friends, but he's a cool guy overall. So about a week or 2 into moving in, I recall that both Jack and I were at home. I had just gotten back from work, and Jack was already there. It was sometime in the afternoon, and I remembered that when I got home, Jack was in the kitchen. He told me that he was going to go to the store and asked if I needed anything, and I said no. So at that point, I went down the hallway and into my bedroom. It was really nice because we each had our own bathrooms attached to our bedroom. After going inside of my room, I went to the bathroom to take a shower. About 10 minutes later or so, I was out of the shower and getting dressed when I heard somebody try to open my bedroom door. The door was locked, just because I was in a habit of locking the bedroom door from the last house that I had lived in. Of course, I assumed that it was Jack who had tried to open my door. I mean, who else would it be? I wasn't sure if he was back yet or never left. It seemed kind of odd, because I thought he was going to the store. I was busy for the moment and figured that I would ask him what he wanted in a couple of minutes, and he hadn't said anything. Still, I found it kind of odd that Jack would just try to barge into my room like that. He had never done that before. I finished up getting dressed and shaved, and then left my bedroom. This was probably like 5 minutes later. I didn't see Jack in the living room or kitchen area, so I went over to his bedroom. His door was slightly open, but I could tell that he wasn't in the room. I called out, asking what he had wanted, but he didn't answer me. So then I went into my bedroom again and texted Jack. I asked him if he was at the store. He responded pretty quickly, saying yes. He was almost done shopping. I realized then that it couldn't have possibly been Jack, who had tried opening my door moments later. I heard the sound of the front door to our apartment open and then close. At that point, I called Jack and told him what was going on. He realized he had forgotten to lock the apartment door when he left. I ran over and locked the door. Whoever had been in our place had left. Then I went back to my room about 10 minutes later. When Jack returned, we both searched the apartment. Nothing was missing or stolen, and nobody was inside anymore, so who was in the apartment and why we never found out, it remains a mystery. But neither of us forgot to lock the doors while living there again.